Dan, I appreciate your time today. What I think is really interesting is that the role of the superintendent continues to evolve, at least from an outsider's perspective, in that some of the skills that might have been required even 5-10 years ago seem to be changing in the same ways that we're looking at our students and our teachers. How have you seen that evolution, and what is that required from your own sort of personal development to serve your community in that same ever-growing fashion?
Great question. I'm in my 4th year as superintendent, so the changes that have occurred have been, I'm kind of in the new mode compared to what they used to be. It used to be as superintendents, as I watched them as a student and even as a teacher, mostly managing to make sure that the district stayed in the black and really had no role in instruction and just kept the ship going in the right direction. And of course, nowadays, that's not the case, that superintendents really are playing a more key role in making sure that instruction is meeting the needs of students, that you're continuing to evolve, incorporating technology as appropriate, making sure that your district remains viable and competitive in the larger choice market that now exists. It's a multifaceted position, but I really love it.
Talk about and I think that's interesting, so 4 years in, we're looking at budgets differently. We're looking at alternative resources and ways in which to engage the private sector. In your estimation, even in the 4 years and even before, as an observer in that regard or in different roles in education, are you seeing the same change, which is we can have productive conversations with corporate America, the private sector, to bring in alternative sources of funding, to support our schools and our community in ways that probably didn't happen when you and I were growing up, because we had too much of a division of church and state, if you will, between public and private.
Right.
Are you seeing that, and how do you engage the local community in progressive discussions?
You know, we were awarded a STEM grant from the state of Iowa a year ago, $25,000, which isn't a lot, but it's $25,000 more that helped us really further implement some STEM programming, and that was just the biggest of a series of smaller awards that we've gotten. So we have had to start looking at other ways to bring in finance and resources to the district. The money from the state continues to shrink each year, and so it is more important than ever now to be seeking out corporate partners and external funding sources.
And to that point, I would imagine that your level of discernment and your leadership team's discernment in purchasing, if we talk about technology, has to be that much more informed, I would imagine. These blanket decisions can't be made anymore, because now there are technologies that can be personalized to K-8, to the high school level. How have you as a team looked at that so that you're on top of what's available and that you can actually look at it and say, okay, this is a good decision, or let's go in a different direction?
5 years ago, our district was one of the early adopters of the one-to-one initiative in Iowa, just at the high school level, and they bought MacBook Pros. When we looked at renewing last spring, the price between that and a Chromebook, just night and day. We
Slightly
could get
different.
5 Chromebooks to 1 MacBook. So we had to look at what is the best use of our resources. How do we continue to offer this to our students, but then also we can't just have it be at the high school, because our middle school students have needs. We were actually able to go 312 with a one-to-one device, and we're almost one-to-one in grades K2 with iPads for really the same cost as they had just done 5 years ago with the high school only. So really being smart about money and options and staying on top of what the latest developments are and the costs.
One other big point of conversation I'm finding is around the ownership of learning on the student side, that we're really seeing them go from consumer to creator.
Right.
K through 12 in so many different ways. And then the question is, how do we document that and communicate that out? And some folks talk about, even from the grading perspective, and the way we report achievement is changing. And I think what's interesting is, how does that get communicated to parents so that we build engagement and we can actually look and see our students, are they learning, or can we make adjustments? How do you look at that, sort of that feedback loop, and how you can better support the teacher, the student, and the family?
We had, before I came, so probably 5 years ago, a teacher who jumped into standards-based grading with little information to parents or to students about what that meant, and it didn't go well, and then it became, that must be a bad thing, even though at the elementary level we were already doing it successfully. So our high school principal, who is new 3 years ago, started slower with a core group of 7 to 8 teachers, and methodically mapped out how do we bring this to our secondary campus, and has gotten teachers to do just a little bit here and there to involve parents, to involve students. Here's what standards-based grading is, here's what it isn't, here's how it really reflects what students are learning, not just, I got a B in math, what does that mean, but rather here's what I'm proficient in when it comes to standards. That STEM grant that I referenced at the high school is a partnership with 3 of our neighboring school districts, and it's to create an opportunity for our high school kids to really own and be in charge, to be empowered in their learning, where they are learning core content, but it's through passion-based, project-based learning experiences. It's an outgrowth of a program in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, about 2 hours south of us, and it has really flipped the conversation when it comes to who owns the learning, and kids totally drive this, and they have to decide, am I taking this for an English credit, for a science credit, and then they know the power standards they have to meet, and through their work, they have to be able to demonstrate that they are proficient in those standards in order to gain the credit. And they know that going in, and again, because they're in charge of it, it's a successful program. So that has just lifted off. We're in the first year, and looking forward to many more years with that.
I think the opportunity, when we look at employment and sort of a professional career in education, is continuing to change. And I think the stories are helping to do that, where we see potentiality in so many different ways, right?
Yeah.
So when you were a college student, did you ever envision that you would be in this seat now as a superintendent in charge of young people in that regard, in setting a path, a direction, and then providing the leadership along the way?
In the back of my head, I knew at some point I'd like to be a superintendent one day, but I never wanted to be a high school principal because I saw the work that they did, and I thought that just is not for me. I probably will just be content to be in the classroom because I don't want to go through that hoop. And I ended up going through that experience in middle school principal as well, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. But as I look back to 1991 when I left college, what did I think my career would look like as to what it has turned out to be? No, but I don't think any of us could have predicted the explosion of technology and just how much knowledge is, doubling in such short periods of time, and the opportunities that students now have and that teachers have as well to be connected with one another, not just, in a geographic area, but truly around the world.
Well, continued success.
Thank you.